of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart. Welcome to the campus of North Idaho College and today's broadcast of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Good afternoon. This is our second in a five-part series of programs dealing with the topic, the future of the United States. Will Orwell's 1984 be realized? We're doing this in conjunction with a convocation series at North Idaho College. Our guest today is Dr. Milton Rokeach, who is a professor of sociology and psychology at Washington State University and director of the Unit on Human Values of the Social Research Center at that institution. He has previously taught at the University of Western Ontario and Michigan State University. Rokeach is past president of the Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues. He received his PhD in social psychology from the University of California at Berkeley. Dr. Rokeach is well known in the circles of sociology and psychology for his publications, including a number of books, and one of the best known is The Nature of Human Values. Dr. Rokeach has been with us on campus during this series to deal with the topic, and we shall address that same topic on this program, using television to influence viewers' political values and behavior as it relates to our overall topic of 1984. Dr. Rokeach, welcome to our program.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
It is our pleasure, I assure you. I would like to welcome to the panel Mary Lou Reed, Richard Snyder, and Judy Meyer. And we will invite questions in the first series from Lou Reed.
Dr. Rokeach, you have spent most of your adult life in the study of human values, and I think we should preface this afternoon with asking you, what do you mean? What is your definition of value, and just what are we talking about when we say human values?
Yes. The question that you ask me is more difficult than it appears on the surface, because in my opinion, professional psychologists and sociologists would have great difficulty in answering this type of question. Most of them use words like values and attitudes and opinions more or less interchangeably. Anyhow, to me, the word value has a very distinctive meaning. It means either a desired end state of existence that people strive for, or a desired mode of behavior that people strive for. And if it isn't a desired end state, and if it isn't a desired mode of behavior, it's not a value.
So it has to do with desire and striving.
Yes.
All right. Well, will you move into telling us about your proposal that you did for the National Institute of Mental Health, dealing with this experiment with TV? Can you give us a description?
All right. I take it you want a very brief description.
A workable description, one that will let our viewers know.
First thing I think I'd like to mention is that this work is work I've done with colleagues, and I think it's proper to be very clear on a TV program who the colleagues are. Myself, my wife, who is a professor of sociology, Dr. Sandra Ball Rokeach, is one of my colleagues. And then Dr. Joel W. Grube, G-R-U-B-E, of the Social Research Center at Washington State University. So when I say we, you'll know who I'm talking about. This project was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and it concerned itself with the question as to whether it would be possible to translate some of the theories that we've developed over the past 10 years that are concerned with the question of whether it is possible to influence and change values, human values, desired end states of existence or modes of behavior, and by changing and influencing these values, also influencing related attitudes, and most important, related behavior. The work that we've done in the laboratory and in the classroom for the last 10 years leads now to the question, is it possible to translate all this work by designing a relatively brief television program, say 30 minutes long, that contains all the theoretical ideas, that is easily understood by the average person watching television, so that it is now possible to move from the classroom to the mass medium of the television set, and instead of influencing 45 students in your class, begin to think about the possibility of influencing 45 million people who are watching exactly the same material at home on their television screen. So the purpose of this whole research project was to see if this was a reasonable and sensible application of theories developed prior to that in the classroom and in the laboratory.
Richard Snyder.
Is it possible?
Well, you know, I gave a report this morning which showed the television program that we produced, which described who the audience was, namely adults watching it in the privacy of their home. I reported a body of results, all of which suggest that the answer to your question is yes.
What could be the translated application of this, say, nationwide or perhaps worldwide in terms of communication satellites? Is this possible, relatively easy?
Well, you know, the report that I presented this morning is what happened to a group of people who watched our program without interruption, who lived in one city in eastern Washington. The results were very dramatic. The results showed that the behavior of these people were affected 2 to 3 months afterwards, mainly with respect to the amounts of money that they were influenced to contribute to worthwhile social causes, that their values had been affected, that their behavior had been affected. Getting to your question, we have no theoretical reason to think that the results that we have obtained in one city in eastern Washington would not also be applicable to the Pacific Northwest, would not also be applicable to the whole of the United States, and would not also be applicable if the program was beamed by satellite to, let us say, all English-speaking peoples of the world. We have no good theoretical reason to think that the results would not be the same, because the basic notions, the basic techniques, the basic ideas would be identical. And we see nothing particular or distinctive or unique about eastern Washington.
Would there be any, just to finish following up on this, would there be any problems encountered, say, by broadcasting to all English-speaking nations, but perhaps Britain might generally hold values in a different priority than, say, Ireland, who in turn might hold a different set of values than Australia? Right. Does this present a problem in doing that?
Not really, because we're not focusing upon the different values that different nations or cultures hold. We are focusing on the ideal conceptions that people have of themselves which are more or less absolute all over the world. The ideal conceptions that people have of themselves, that they are decent, moral, humane, kind people. These are the kinds of feelings we appeal to, and we have no reason to think that these feelings that I've just mentioned are any the more or any of the less prevalent in South Australia than they are in the eastern part of Washington or the northern part of Idaho.
Judy Meyer.
Dr. Rokeach, would you elaborate? Apparently there are 18 values on one list and 18 on another. And tell us what your results were in the test group you did of what were the highest values and corresponding the lowest chosen by your group.
Well, in the program that we showed, we made a point of explaining that for national samples of the American people, the top values are family security, world at peace, freedom. And that the bottom values, the ones that are least valued, are such values as social recognition, an exciting life, pleasure, thus suggesting that the average American is not interested in keeping up with the Joneses and is not interested in excitement, that they're far more puritanical than they are made out to be. So these would be the kinds of results that we continue to get over and over again.
And then your evaluation of your ability to influence these values and some of the things your target values is how you described them this morning. Explain to us more about, my notes show you listed racism, sexism, and environmental target values. What did you find happened as you visited with your test groups?
Now the top three values and the bottom three values are generally not the target values we work with, except for freedom, which is. Mm-hmm. The target values that we zeroed in on, that's all we mean by target values, are freedom, and we wanted to design a program that was designed to persuade people who cared little for freedom to care more for it. Mm-hmm. Equality, and we wanted to design a program so that people who cared little for equality would care more for it. And thirdly, a world of beauty. And here again, we wanted to design a program so that people who cared little for a world of beauty would end up caring more for it, and hopefully in doing so, care more for ecological, environmental issues and concerns.
And did you feel you were effective at, frightening word, manipulating someone's thinking? And what does this have implications for the ethical use of television? That's a small question.
First of all, I do feel we were effective. Secondly, I cringe when you asked if we were effective in manipulating people, because we, by no stretch of the imagination, think of ourselves as manipulating anybody. And the reason why I can say this with so much feeling is that in my whole career, lifelong career as a teacher, we're always interested in influencing and educating students, and we never think of ourselves as manipulating students. The idea of educating people and influencing people is not the same idea as manipulating people, and perhaps I should hasten to add, to me the word manipulation means getting people to do what you want them to do regardless as to whether or not it is good for them. In that sense, we do not see ourselves as manipulating anybody, because we don't want people to do anything that is not in their interests. And you'll notice I repeated over and over again this morning, we designed a program, we produced a program, we wrote the script, we showed it. But if a person didn't want to turn on the set, they didn't have to. He didn't have to. He or she didn't have to. And if the person turned on the set and then was bored with the program, there was nothing to stop the person from turning the program off. How then can you talk about manipulating people if we neither induce them to watch the program, nor induce them to continue to watch it if they didn't want to.
To those viewers who turned in late to our program, our guest today is Dr. Milton Rokeach. He is a professor of sociology and psychology at Washington State University and the director of the Unit on Human Values at the Social Research Center. Dr. Rokeach, I was most impressed at your presentation today in how you tied this research to what could happen in society under George Orwell's description in 1984. I agree that from all literature and publications I've seen, this is really the first documented evidence of the extent of control or effect that television could have on one's values and behavior if it was used in a controlled setting by an unethical group. Let us suppose from that research that you've done that someone was able in any country, including the United States, to get control of, for example, the political system, and they were authoritarian or totalitarian in nature, and they saw the value of using this particular media, all the telecommunications, to change the behavior so that the citizenry would think that what they were doing in public policy was in the best interest of our country and the world, and it was not. Has your research indicated that 1984, as Orwell described it, is even more possible than we thought when he wrote the book in 1950?
Our research indicates that 1984 is possible on the one side and can be thwarted on the other side. Let me see if I can explain why I answer you this way. Our research, first of all, indicates that it is quite possible to use the television medium to enlighten people. What do I mean by that? I mean to make people more aware of themselves, to understand themselves better, to know themselves better, in Socrates' sense, than they did before they watched our program. It's always a thrilling experience for a human being to say, hey, I now know something about myself I didn't know before. And we are saying it is that we see no good reason why the television medium cannot be used in order to heighten people's awareness of themselves in that Socrates sense of knowing oneself. So in that sense, we think that that the aims of the nightmarish 1984 can be thwarted by the widespread use of television. On the other hand, contrary to what I thought 10 years ago, I now also feel that it is equally possible to employ these techniques, which ostensibly include techniques of increasing self-awareness, to appeal to values already there that you don't necessarily want to change. It's also possible to use these techniques to appeal to values that you could call sick values, and persuade people to realize or actualize their values, which you wouldn't want them to know are sick, but which you think are sick. So in that sense, it is possible to employ these same techniques in order to get people to do things and believe things, but especially to do things which, or to get certain subgroups of people who have what you and I might call the wrong values, to persuade them to act on the basis of these wrong values.
I think you've done a clear job of distinguishing between educating individuals and controlling individuals, two fundamental differences.
I continue to insist that that you can employ any medium for the purpose of persuasion or for the purpose of education. And these look like the same process, but they are not. As a teacher who gets paid to teach, who loves to teach, my job is education, which means my job is to learn how to better attempt to influence the values, the attitudes, and the behavior of my students. I make no apologies for it. I don't think I earn my keep unless I learn to do it well. And the program that I showed you this morning that we worked on is a program designed to educate people to become better than they used to be. This is not, it looks like persuasion, and I would like to think it is not persuasion.
Lou Reed.
Well, Dr. O'Keefe, do you have any examples of where you feel that television is currently being misused, being used to reinforce what you would call sick values? How did you arrive at your current skepticism?
Well, I arrived at my current skepticism when I began to see some recent advertisements on television for the Pontiac Trans Am car, in which the car was being advertised with the value. And now the excitement begins. What the people who designed these ads were doing was attempting to identify one particular value in a subgroup of individuals who have that value, and I suspect they're young teenagers and young adults for whom the value of excitement is very, very strong, and then attempting to pitch the sales ad for that car in terms of this value.
But isn't that the basic theory of advertising? Has
Yes,
this not
it
been
is.
going
Yes,
on
it
for a
is.
long time? Do you feel
The
it's...
basic theory of advertising, but carried to a level of sophistication that I haven't seen before. In what sense sophistication? By surgically identifying the value thereafter, and then surgically designing the ads to appeal to the value that they're trying to appeal to in a precision-like way with a scalpel. And that kind of sophistication is what I'm...
Well, have you
reacting to.
seen political advertising that you felt also was at that degree of sophistication to be frightening?
I've seen all kinds of political ads, but they take pot shots at this and pot shots at that. And I don't feel that political advertising is quite at the level of that level of sophistication.
That's really...
Richard Snyder.
Imagine a scenario in which a clever politician were to somehow combine the work that you and your colleagues have done with the work of Stanley Milgram and his experiments with people surrendering to perceived authority figures.
Mm-hmm.
Can you feature something like this?
Well, you're associating what we're doing with Stanley Milgram's makes me very, very uncomfortable.
I'm thinking it was two different experiments.
Yes, I
but
understand this, and people who are watching this program may or may not be familiar with Stanley Milgram's work, so let me quickly add that his work is concerned with the lengths that people will go to in order to obey authority. Our approach is very different. Our approach does not rely upon appeals to authority. It relies on appeals to the values that people already have, or it relies on attempts to first change a set of values to be the values you want them to have, and then appealing to those values. So at the moment, I can't imagine combining these two techniques because they're two very different theoretical routes on why people do what they do. And the approach that I described this morning and that I'm attempting to describe now is, I would suggest, is not an approach based on appeals to obedience.
Judy Meyer.
I'm struggling with the ethics and the economics. Unfortunately, they end up too often intertwined. We're talking about Madison Avenue and what's going to keep Madison Avenue from scooping up the study that you're looking forward to publishing and using it in their view for educating the public to the product they have. And where do the ethics come from to help direct that decision making?
This is a free country, and we cannot, once results are published, we cannot, then everybody has equal access to knowledge, to results, to theories. And I personally would not like to see it any other way. And I would personally be appalled at any attempt to prevent any group, however economically oriented or however anti-humanistically oriented, to have access to information. I think that the best answer I can think of to such conceivable abuses is the slogan, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. That if we see attempts to employ these kinds of techniques for selfish purposes, we speak up. By who is the we? We as individuals, we as organizations, we point it out. And in that way combat it. And one of the things I like best about living in a democratic country like the United States, with all of its faults, is that it is more possible in the United States to find people who are willing to speak up and point out injustice than in any other country in the world, if not more, at least equal to that of other democratic countries in the world. So for that reason, I appreciate especially consumer groups, civil rights groups, Jane Fonda's, and so on, who at least are willing to draw your attention to what somebody else is doing. Mm-hmm. And the alternative to that is not allow that to happen.
Dr. Rokeach, quickly, I would like to put forth a thesis for you to react to, and that is the more we are aware or have knowledge of what our values are, which you've certainly spent your life doing, and this TV program is an example, is it not correct to assume that the more knowledge one has of their values, the more likely they are not to be someday manipulated or controlled by those with unethical motives?
Of course, that's my basic educational philosophy. The more you know yourself, the less you are likely to be in a position of having your values, your attitudes, your behavior manipulated for somebody else's benefit. But I hasten to add, if your values are manipulated for your own benefit, it could still be not for the benefit of society. If you have a set of values that appeals to your need for keeping up with the Joneses or for excitement, it may be in your interest, but it may not be in the society's interest. So I'm not especially necessarily impressed with the argument that it's in your interest or not. Even that kind of interest we have to be vigilant against.
I'm so sorry to have to interrupt. I wish we had much more time. You've been most informative, and I know the panel joins with me in saying it's been very, very informative, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for asking me.
And I express my appreciation of the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. Milton Rokeach from Washington State University, and he's been part of this 5-week series on the future of the United States. Will Orwell's 1984 be realized? I hope you'll be with us again next week when we continue this important discussion in this series. Please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by a North Idaho College student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.